Okay, there's that. All right, ready to go?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
Recording in progress.
What is going on, fam, and welcome to the Healthy, Fit, and Pain-Free podcast. I am your host, Doc Tyler, and this is episode 42. And this episode is titled, Changing Your Relationship with Bad, and I use this in big ass air quotes, food, featuring Devon Kroesche. So why I wanted to do this podcast was because Devon and I actually we met in person a few weeks ago, and we really kind of started talking about, disordered eating and just different lifestyles that circulate around certain eating behaviors. And let's be honest, we all love quote unquote bad food. At least that's what people like to label them. We love good tasting food, and we don't like restrictions. However, like everything in life, gluttony is a horrible thing. And if we eat too much, it can be bad for us. So it's creating that balance, but obviously you don't want to hear it from me. You want to hear it from a registered dietitian who has all of the knowledge, all of the experience, and all of the flavor, if I must say. So a little bit about Devon. Devon is Director of Marketing and registered dietitian for Case Specific Nutrition. She had gained her bachelor and master's degree in Nutrition and Dietetics at Pitt University. She did a clinical internship with UPMC Presby Hospital, which then led her to join Case Specific Nutrition in 2021. Now she's inspired to become a media-focused dietitian to combat the overabundance, of conflicting nutritional information, help others to overcome unrealistic expectations from someone else's highlight reel, and has a special interest in disordered eating. Welcome, Devon, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. That was quite a mouthful, but I appreciate the good intro. It pretty much sums it up.
I mean, you totally deserve it, so you have to give a good intro to someone who deserves it, right?
I'll take it.
Very good. Devon, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. It's beautiful and sunny in Pittsburgh for the first time in what feels like a while. So I'm digging it.
Beautiful and sunny in Pittsburgh is like an oxymoron.
It is. We'll dive into why everyone should be on a vitamin D supplement later.
There we go. I love it. Segues already. So, to really dive into this, I love hearing people's stories. Everyone has their reasoning for why they got in the profession, especially, as you and I talked, I can definitely see the passion kind of oozing out, and we'll definitely see this throughout this podcast. So what got you interested and really set the stage for the future of you as a dietitian?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me. I should have mentioned this earlier, but this is something I'm super passionate about. And, you and I, we had a lot to talk about just in terms of so much of the overlap that you see between your clients and my clients and the things that they struggle with, and how fitness and nutrition, they really are not just two separate things, but they're really tied together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited to really dive into this topic. And you really see this disordered eating from all different spectrums of health and wellness, whether it's a person who's underweight, a teenager, or someone who's overweight, middle-aged person who's, never really taken an interest in their health and wellness. And so just to kind of back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about how I ended up in this profession, I think it's always really interesting to ask dietitians how they ended up in this field, because, and lots of other folks too, especially people in the health and wellness field, typically there is that really close personal connection. We all tend to be really passionate about what we do for a reason. And that's certainly the case with me. So again, backing up, when I was a teenager, I really struggled with my eating. I ended up even doing a treatment center for an eating disorder when I was about 14.
Wow.
That was a really wild experience. I could tell you more about that if you're interested, but it was that kind of set the stage for realizing that, I'd fallen down this rabbit hole through, especially growing up in the age of social media. I was born in 1996, so you can do the math. I was born into this late 90s era of diet culture and, thinner is better, and people like Kate Moss saying that there's nothing that tastes as good as skinny feels. These kinds of messages that I, was born into and grew up with, And then throwing social media into the mix, with being able to see people's highlight reels and lots of edited photos and lots of diet plans online and Pinterest workouts to kill belly fat, which you know is better as well as anyone else, that you can't just lose body fat in one particular part of your body. So all of these kinds of things kind of just created this perfect storm. Also growing up in a household that was very weight conscious and food conscious. I also became a vegetarian around 10 or 11 because my whole household became vegetarian. That dietary restriction added another level of potential for disorder. Not that in and of itself will lend itself to an eating disorder, but dietary restrictions in general can sometimes contribute to something like this, especially when you have to start paying more attention to your nutrition. So it really kind of grew out of a fascination for nutrition and health and wellness that really came from a good place, which is what I see with my clients a lot of the time. They take an interest, especially our young clients, they'll take an interest in health and wellness and nutrition at a very young age. Oftentimes it's paired with kind of a perfectionist type personality. We know that there is no perfect way to exercise, there's no perfect way to eat, and there is no perfect weight. And so trying to achieve that perfection when perfection doesn't exist can oftentimes lead things to kind of spiral out of control. And that was certainly the case with me. So I went through those struggles. I worked with a registered dietitian who really inspired me, helped me see that there is a balanced way to eat that is healthy and it doesn't involve a ton of restrictions. And through overcoming that, I really was inspired to help people like me who, were interested in nutrition, wanted to learn more, but maybe got a little bit misguided along the way, especially, in the age of the internet and the age of social media, to kind of bring them back to reality and show them that it really exists along a spectrum of health. Again, there is no perfect weight. There's no perfect way to eat. There's just the way to eat that works for you, the weight that you feel healthy and comfortable at, that type of thing. And so that's kind of what led me down this path of becoming a registered dietitian. I came out to the University of Pittsburgh because they have one of the best nutrition and dietetics programs. That was really, really lucky and fortunate of me. So I went through their program through undergrad. I stayed for my master's degree. It was in graduate school when I started working with Case Specific Nutrition. And I found that our values and principles really kind of aligned in terms of our nutrition philosophies, which is really about meeting people where they are, realizing that not everyone is ready the window or smash the scale or totally reject the diet mindset. Sometimes you really have to meet people where they are and help them along the path of finding a more balanced, a more intuitive way of eating. And so that's kind of where I've been since then. Once I finished graduate school, of course, you mentioned that I did my clinical internship at UPMC Presbyterian at the very beginning of the pandemic. That was super interesting.
Right.
Let's talk about that too if you're interested. So I really got the opportunity when I focused in critical care at Presbyterian to see people all along the spectrum of health. At Case Specific, I'm seeing elite athletes and just, people just trying to get healthy. And then I also saw people on ventilators in the hospital with COVID. So I really saw a huge spectrum of health and what some of these poor habits can lead us to at the end of the line. And so that even further inspired me to kind of focus on the preventative aspect of health and really dive into finding that balance for people before things are too late, and also without falling onto the other spectrum of the disordered eating patterns. And so that's what brings me here today. The last close to a year, I've been counseling with Case Specific, but I've also been diving into the social media side of things. I really love getting in front of people. Opportunities like this are some of my favorite things to do because you can reach a wider audience. With counseling, you're reaching one person at a time and you're really able to dive in and get really deep with them. But the beauty of this is that there's so much of the nutrition and fitness misinformation that I'm sure you're aware of and you've experienced out there. It's really good to be a voice for evidence-based practice and balance and just good information out in the popular media. So that's something that I'm hoping to contribute to as well. And that's kind of what brought me here today.
Cool. Honestly, we could just end the show right now, and that I'm sure there's something in there that people could definitely take away with and do something with. Awesome. So a lot to unpack there. A lot of great great segues there. But the big one I want to concentrate on first is, so you mentioned you were 14 whenever you were, whenever you were diagnosed with disordered eating and you actually had to seek extended help with it. Do you mind sharing your experiences with that and the struggles and the challenges that you kind of dealt with there, and really what led you to realize that you had to go that next step? You weren't just someone who maybe just had to deal with, like, tame your anxiety a little bit. Maybe it was a little bit more. So if you don't mind, share that experience with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely happy to. And I'll try to talk about it in a way that isn't really like triggering to other people out there who might be struggling with this. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. But yeah, it was a slippery slope. Like I said, it came from a place of interest in nutrition and interest in health and wellness. Again, I was kind of raised in this, late 90s, early 2000s era when, this is going to sound a little off topic, but I promise it connects. There's a big prescription opioid crisis, and you were seeing people being overprescribed some of these medications. And I was just seeing the obesity crisis in America and all of these chronic health problems that a lot of people were struggling with. And I remember thinking from a very young age, like, there's got to be a better way, right? I see that there's all these lifestyle and more, I guess, natural, for lack of a better term, approaches to health and wellness. And that's very much focused on the preventative aspect. And so I was really interested in preventative wellness, especially that which you can achieve through nutrition. Of course, that's what registered dietitians do, is we do medical nutrition therapy. We help heal people through nutrition in addition to, regular traditional forms of medicine. But all of that was really, really interesting to me. Again, I also grew up in a household that was very weight conscious and food conscious. And, my mom was doing her VHS workout tapes in the living room, and I would join along with her. And so I was just really interested in nutrition and fitness and all of the great benefits that we could get out of it, not just as an individual, but as a population.
Mm-hmm.
So that was of real interest to me. And then I want to say I was probably around 13 or 14. You hit puberty, your body changes, you shoot up, maybe gain some weight, gain some curves. And what I noticed was that I always got a lot of comments as a little kid about how skinny I was and how I needed to gain weight. Those like Italian, Irish grandmas.
Yes.
And then you get a little older, you get a little more curves, and suddenly those comments stop. And what I noticed, it kind of felt like, and you may have experienced this or heard this from your clients, is when you lose weight, everyone congratulates you. Everyone has something good to say. And then when you gain weight, people fall silent. And so you think about what kind of message that sends.
Sure.
That means, weight loss, good, weight gain, bad. And so those kinds of messages, receiving a lot of positive reinforcement. Again, once I started restricting my calories and started losing weight, even as a 13 or 14-year-old, I was getting a lot of positive reinforcement from people around me, like, wow, you lost weight, you look good. Even from friends, oh my God, you're so skinny. Like, these kinds of comments that reinforced kind of that idea that thinner is better. And it kind of just, again, sent me down that spiral, and realizing that what I ate, I could control what I ate in a certain way. It was also a means of control. At that tender age of 13, 14, you don't have a lot of control over your environment, and you're starting to become that age where you're really seeking some independence.
Mm-hmm.
And food is one of those places where you have a little bit more control, a little bit more say. And so part of it was also in being able to control what I ate, and being able to control my body size. It's one of those things that you can control as a young person. And so that was definitely a part of it as well. So again, it was kind of just like the perfect storm. Also being a little bit more interested in nutrition because of the vegetarianism aspect of my household, making sure I got enough protein, stuff like that. So that kind of started to spiral out of control. I started losing more and more weight, and it wasn't even me that realized that it was a problem. It was my older sister, who I'm super grateful for today. She is the one who finally was like, all right, enough is enough. She talked to my parents. She's like, this is not good. Devon's just not losing weight because she's shooting up and growing. Like, there's something else going on here. And so I ended up going through Renfrew's day program. So I ended up taking my first month off of high school, actually, to attend this program.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was really, really intensive. I was there all day. and worked with a group of other people. And what I often saw was that a lot of the people I was in that program with, it was not their first time. It was their second, third, fourth time going through these kinds of programs. And I just remember thinking, like, this is not going to be me. I don't want this to be my life. I don't want this to be my future. I feel like I'm a smart kid. I've got a big life ahead of me. I'm not going to let this stand in the way. And so I kind of talked myself through that, worked with a lot of great therapists and dietitians throughout that process. And then, you know, kind of in the aftermath, I thought to myself, like, something good's got to come out of this. This was a hard experience, but I have to find the good in it. And that's kind of what inspired me to become a dietitian, because I didn't want the same people that, you know, grew up with the same experiences as me to kind of fall down this rabbit hole and, you know, just with all good intentions. And so that was kind of how that disordered eating and getting treatment for that kind of led me to where I am today. And of course, I'm super grateful for it. I'm hoping to help more people, you know, with the things that I struggled with.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for sharing. I know that's sometimes that stuff can be a little bit more difficult to share, but, you know, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit, but having a story like yours is very strong too, because, you know, and we'll definitely dive down this unfortunate rabbit hole. But, you know, when you get on social media, you see like all of there. I mean, if you want to look up a health coach or whatever on social, or a nutritionist, I mean, you'll find millions. You know, you'll find so many. And, you know, like a lot of them, I hate to say this, but I've even come across a few in my life who, you know, a lot of them started out because someone's like, oh, you have a very pretty face. You would be, you know, or like, oh, you got a hot bod, whatever. And like, you would be really good on it. You'd be a really good Instagram model. And so they just they go into that. And so it's, you know, they already have this genetic like gift, and they just use that obviously as like marketing basically. And then they possibly portray false messages out there. But like, what's really interesting with that, with you, and you know, there's other people out there. One, I'm going to actually interview here in a couple weeks for a podcast who they've actually experienced the roller coaster. You know, they went through the disordered, you know, the disordered eating. They went through the poor relationship with food. They went through the psychological stress. They went through the yo-yos of everything, and they finally found something that worked for them. And that's where it really gets powerful, because you can really empathize with the people that walk through your door. You know, and I know for myself, like that was kind of the thing with me, is I went through a similar struggle with disordered eating, not to the extent of yourself. One, because I'm a guy and we never admit whenever there's something wrong. But two, just because, you know, I found certain ways around it, and there's still struggles to this day. But that's where you can truly interact with people, especially if you gain a background to help them. So very cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it's something that we don't talk about enough, is that it's not just, you know, your stereotypical straight white teenage female that struggles with this. It's people from all genders and races and cultural backgrounds and socioeconomic classes. It really can affect lots of different people. And so that's another reason why I'm really a big advocate for getting some more diversity in dietetics. My CEO of Case Specific Nutrition is a guy, we call him the Pittsburgh Dietitian. And
Andrew Wade.
Andrew Wade, we'll give him a shout out. He's kind of a unicorn in some ways, because we don't see a lot of men in dietetics, because again, I think it comes out of this experience with disordered eating. And it's maybe not always so culturally or socially acceptable to admit that you're struggling with something like this as a man.
Sure. I would have to argue with you. I would not call Andrew a unicorn. But other than that, I totally support everything that you say. Anyhow, so one thing that you mentioned, though, that I really like too, is you said, you know, for one thing with Case Specific, but also yourself, is you meet people where they are. Or everybody is genetically has some sort of diet or lifestyle that they can do that's going to work for them. And I think that's often a problem that we come across too on social media, is you'll have my apologies to anyone out there, but like you'll have like Keto Karen, on Instagram. And so Karen is a person who struggled with weight loss all her life, and she did a keto diet. And the keto diet worked for her. Why? We have no idea. It could be genetics. It could just be that she really loves fats and proteins. Who knows? But for Karen, the keto diet worked. And then because of that, Karen gets on and she blows up. The keto diet is the greatest thing that you can possibly do. And then this creates this false dichotomy in the dietetics and nutrition world that people are like, well, we have to follow Karen because obviously it worked for her. And I feel like that is something too that we struggle with. And so, I mean, how do you feel about, whenever you come across on Instagram, obviously like social media is a big thing of yours. And you mentioned about that kind of, unfortunately, but fortunately, really, in hindsight, led you down the road that you went. Where do you kind of see that impacting people?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because everyone eats, and so everyone has an opinion about nutrition. Especially anyone that's dieted and had success becomes an expert because that testimonial marketing is really powerful, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so I'll hear that from my clients. We're following more of like a balanced nutrition plan that works for them, and then they are having a hard time not looking at the person next to them, their sister-in-law, their neighbor who tried keto and lost 30 pounds overnight. What you're not seeing is, first of all, what's going to happen a year or 2 or 5 down the line. Are they going to be able to maintain that physique that they achieved, or is it going to come back on? Because a lot of the keto Karens that you're seeing that were on Instagram promoting the keto diet ultimately end up in my office because they gain the weight back.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one example. But yeah, it can be tough. It can be tough to navigate those kinds of testimonial style marketing when you have someone who followed a diet and it worked for them. Maybe it did work for them long term, but I always challenge my clients to ask themselves, like, does this make sense for me?
Mm-hmm.
Does that diet pattern make sense for me? I love pizza. So the answer would probably be no.
Yeah.
If keto worked for Karen, but you love pizza, work for you, right? Like it's just not a long-term sustainable option. So I'm always on the side of least restriction.
Sure.
There are lots of ways to eat healthy and not restrict all like any foods other than those that you're intolerant or allergic to. The whole nother story. But I like to say that all foods fit, and we just kind of have to figure out what is the best way to do so. And it's honestly a much more sustainable way to eat for the rest of your life. And it can be hard because we live in an instant gratification society. Again, you're only seeing that highlight reel. You're not seeing keto Karen when she gained the 20, 30 pounds back.
Mm-hmm.
You're only seeing that weight loss. And so kind of observing social media with a critical eye is going to be really important. Also remembering that just because someone followed a diet and it worked for them does not make them an expert. Again, that's kind of what led me down this path because I was interested in the science and the evidence of it. And if that's something that you're interested in too, then a dietitian is the right person to be working with for sure.
Devon, you talked about research. That's blasphemy. We do not follow science in the nutrition world.
What's science?
How dare you bring up research and articles and actual support? No. I'm just kidding, obviously. No, that's a good point too. I remember I met a guy once someone that he was working with actually was on The Biggest Loser, and he was one of the top people in The Biggest Loser, and you would have never known it after that, because he definitely gained the weight back, definitely wasn't living the lifestyle, and even it was at that point that he was considering doing a gastro type of surgery, like procedure.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing too, is with that, people, it's easy if you submerge yourself in a situation where you're constantly supported, you have all the food given to you, you have all these trainers given to you, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, but then after you're released into the wild, it's very easy for you to fall off that track.
Yeah.
Like a 30-day like restrictive diet, like, yeah, I mean, anyone technically can do anything for 30 days, but what happens after that 30 days for the rest of your life that really impacts everything?
What happens on day 31?
Yeah.
For sure. I'm so glad you brought that up too, because there's a reason why that that client of yours was on TV because quick weight loss, it's sexy and it sells. And no wonder people want to watch it because it's impressive. But really, I try to instill in my clients, like, what's actually impressive is being able to maintain a healthy weight over the long term, over your whole life. Being able to continue to show up in the gym every day once you've reached your weight loss goal. Being able to show up and, meal prep, again, even after you've stopped seeing that positive reinforcement and dopamine spike by the scale going down and down and down. That's what's really hard. And so it's easy for us to look at those people on social media or TV that have done this quick weight loss and they're super successful. But again, we're not seeing what happens after. And we can go, and I'm not saying this to be critical of people that have lost weight and gained it back or lost weight quickly and even maintained it potentially, because we don't live in a society that is conducive to a healthy lifestyle. Think about the fact, like, from my window right now, I can see an Eaton Park, I can see an Applebee's, and I can see a KFC, and I don't see a gym, unfortunately. And there's a problem with that, right? We live we're blessed to live in a day and age where we have hyper caloric and hyper palatable foods readily available to us without us having to go and hunt and eat it. And that's a blessing, right? And we also, we have this readily accessible calories to us all the time, and we don't have to be expending any kind of energy to do it. And we are not wired for that. We're wired for prehistoric kind of environment. And so it's not to say that we can't hack back our current environment to optimize it for health and wellness, but we do have to be a little bit more mindful. I talk to my clients, especially when they're going on a road trip or traveling a bunch for work or for play. I'm like, what do I eat when I'm on the road? There are no good options. First of all, there definitely are good options.
Sure.
But secondly, you just have to think about it in advance, right? Like when the pilgrims were traveling, the pioneers were traveling across the United States in their covered wagons, there wasn't going to be a Five Guys along the road. They had to think and plan what they were going to eat or they were going to starve. We're so fortunate that that's not our situation anymore, but we do need to bring that mindfulness back and maybe a little bit of foresight and a little bit of planning to what we're going to eat and how we're going to move, because it doesn't just naturally happen in our day anymore. So it makes sense why obesity is an issue in the United States and across the world now in all these developed countries. And it also makes sense now why disordered eating is becoming a problem, because that's kind of, people who see that as the antidote when really it's not. The real antidote is finding a place of balance. And it's not sexy. It doesn't sell on TV or Instagram, but it really is the right way to do things. And that's why we're here, right? Screaming from the rooftops.
Right. So actually, I'm going to go off script here because you brought something up, and I kind of want to play devil's advocate with you a little bit here. So, so one thing that drives me absolutely nuts right now is this whole primal thing that people are attaching to anymore. This all started like way back when CrossFit started becoming big, and CrossFit really promoted a paleo diet, which a paleo diet is basically like you eat nothing in boxes. You should, you walk around the outer edges of the grocery store. It should be nothing that our ancestors didn't eat, blah, blah, blah. And even now, there's the carnivore diet has become a huge thing. And now you see people eating raw liver and, just basically ripping a heart out of a deer and then just eating it raw on the spot. Not to get graphic, but you have these people and they're always like, well, this is not what our ancestors did. This is not what our ancestors did. My argument with this, and granted, again, I'm being facetious here, but my argument with this is, if you were to bring our ancestors from 50 years ago or 100 years ago, or, wow, actually, let's go farther back than that. If you were to bring our ancestors back from 500 years ago and put them right here, and they were to see the life that we have and like the food availability, they would not be upset. They would not be mad at us. They would not be pissed at the fact that a lot of them died because they didn't have food. They didn't have accessibility, or whenever they tried to get their food turned on them and ate them, so when people bring up that we need to be more like our ancestors, I kind of argue with the fact of, well, we made these advancements up to this point, and I get why you're saying that, but at the same time, if our ancestors were here now, they would not be like, you guys are idiots. Why did you guys do this to yourselves? Thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, let's go. So you're right. And if you took our ancestors from 500, even 5,000 years ago and put them here, first of all, we've got the longest lifespan that we've ever been able to achieve as human beings. So you could argue that we're doing pretty well,
Yeah.
all things considered. That's number one. Number two is you didn't live like your ancestors. You want to follow a paleo diet? That's great. There's a lot of good things in the paleo diet, and carnivore diet is another story we could talk about. But you're not living that same lifestyle. So maybe that diet, while there are some good pieces to it, maybe that also doesn't make the most sense for you.
Mm-hmm.
I like things I like about the paleo diet, the whole foods aspect of it, less processed foods in general. Not that processed foods are bad, but the less processed foods just tend to be naturally healthier, and things like that. So again, when it comes to diets like paleo, eating like your ancestors, I always say to take the things, figure out what is good about that diet from a scientific standpoint, what is beneficial. And if you're able to kind of figure that out, the dietitian is a great resource for that.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. I'm going to do it several more times. But, we're figuring out what it is about that diet that's actually beneficial and using that to your advantage, and then kind of leaving the rest of the restrictive aspects of that diet is what's going to make it sustainable for a lifetime, first of all. But also realizing, again, we're blessed to live in a day and age when we don't have to go and fight for our food or deal with infectious diseases that killed people. The average lifespan was 30, very much not too long ago. And so in many ways, we're blessed to live in this day and age. In other ways, these amazing technological advancements that we're fortunate to have do have the negative consequences. And so we have to look at them with a critical eye. Same thing with social media. We've seen that there's a lot of good that could come out of it, but a lot of bad. And so kind of trying to figure out how to view this and how to engage with this current reality that we have with a critical eye, and figuring out what about it is not working for us and how can we hack that back.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. We came together on that one. So I liked it.
We met in the middle.
So with this, and full disclaimer before this next question is I don't want people to automatically, unfortunately too, like with the society now, we tend to get in this mindset of as soon as someone mentions something that sounds like us, we diagnose ourselves with that thing. So I want to make the full disclaimer here that this is not the intention of this, and please, audience, do not take this way. But with your experience, whenever you went through your disordered eating, and even since then, because you've obviously educated yourself and put yourself both experience-wise and scholastically, like put both those hats on, what comparison do you see between those with eating disorders that you experience and really the general population health problem?
Yeah. So it's a good question, because I think, and this is a really important point too, is that you don't have to be this anemic, underweight looking person to be diagnosed with a full-blown eating disorder. Eating disorders and disordered eating patterns exist along all spectrums of body sizes. And oftentimes those people in larger body sizes end up not getting diagnosed because it's just looking like a diet and looking like a good thing from their doctors or their friends' standpoint. And so that's a really important delineation I want to say right off the bat. But in terms of what comparisons and what similarities and differences do I see between the general population and someone that's falling into more of a disordered eating pattern, is, again, I think it's a great thing to take an interest in your health and your fitness, to make it a priority in your life. I think that's a great thing. I think when it starts to become disordered is when it is taking up too much of your life. Again, these healthy eating and exercise patterns are meant to support the things in life that are more important to you, your friends, your family, your work. If they're supporting that and not kind of taking away from that, then we know we're in a good place. If you're avoiding social interactions because you either need to get a workout in, or, a social interaction that you actually want to go to.
Yeah.
Not that cocktail party that you're not interested in, but, avoiding social interactions, avoiding eating in front of other people, letting one food or one meal really, or one step on the scale really ruin your day or your week, that's when I start to get a little bit concerned that we're falling into more of a disordered eating pattern. But what's really interesting is when I'm working with clients, whether it's just for healthy eating or weight loss, just general like chronic disease prevention and health promotion, and people in the eating disorder side of things, I tend to give them a lot of the same advice. It tends to be really a lot of these issues tend to kind of come from the same place. One that I'll hear a lot is stress eating, emotional eating, or restricting food out of stress or emotions. A lot of times these behaviors, although they seem paradoxical, they really come from the same place. And that comes from a place of finding joy and comfort and safety in your eating and maybe exercise. And so one thing that I will oftentimes recommend to my clients when they're struggling with something that's more emotional eating or emotionally restricting is to write out a list of 10 things that provide them those same things. If you have developed a habit, whether it's restriction or whether it's overeating, again, whether you're struggling with an eating disorder or you're just, general population, generally that comes you develop that habit because it's serving you in some way. And so I ask my clients, how is this serving you? How is controlling your calories serving you? What are you getting out of it? Like legitimately, how is, coming home and just kind of eating a bunch of, for lack of a better word, like junk food out of comfort, how is that serving you? And I have them make a list of all of the things that provides them those same benefits that are not food. And the key conclusion there is that it is okay to choose food. I wouldn't say to choose restriction, but to choose food as a source of joy and comfort. There's a reason why it's so integrated into our culture, because it is supposed to be that way of showing love, that way of providing joy and comfort to others and to ourselves. But making sure that that's not always your go-to option. Again, we live in this culture where food is always readily available. And so it's oftentimes that source of joy and comfort that we will lean on. And again, it's an okay thing to lean on, but when it becomes problematic is when you start to reach for that thing every single time without realizing that you have other tools in your toolbox, other coping mechanisms, other sources of joy and comfort at your disposal. And you really want to be varying those things. And again, I'm not a therapist, but you'll probably hear this from your therapist too. Like some people choose smoking, some people choose drugs, some people choose gambling. You might choose food.
Yeah.
And it's of all things considered, it's not a bad choice, but it just can't be the only choice. And so this applies for people that are struggling with, maybe binge eating, obsessive overeating, or like restriction, realizing that food is supposed to be a source of joy and comfort. It just shouldn't be the only one. And so these are some of the conversations I have with a lot of my clients, whether they're a general population or someone in the disordered eating category. So those are some of the comparisons that I'll see. But again, it comes back to we're getting a lot of positive reinforcement from weight loss. And then people are silent when people notice that there's some weight gain. And so when it comes to like how like action items, like how we can move forward and promote a more healthy society, I think it really comes down to paying attention to the words that you say to people about their body size, and maybe just trying to stop that altogether, and really complimenting people for things, especially young folks, complimenting them on things that they are, like you're kind, you're intelligent, those kinds of compliments rather than body comments. Oh my gosh, you're so skinny, are going to be a lot more helpful and empowering to people and rather than detrimental, because you don't really know why someone's losing weight. They could be sick, they could be depressed, they could be stressed, they could be all of these other things. And so I hope I hit things on all heads. But that's kind of the comparisons that I'll see between the general population and the disordered eating population. Again, that more disordered eating is when you start to be avoiding social situations, and it really kind of getting in the way of your life. But I think we all kind of maybe have some disordered eating patterns. A lot of us grew up in I call it the clean plate household, where, you're supposed to finish all the food on your plate and you get rewarded with dessert. And so you think of the dessert as a thing that I can't have until I eat like the quote unquote healthy food, when really all foods that can be healthy in the right amounts. And I don't really like to put any one food on a pedestal.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Yeah, very cool. And so with that too, you mentioned about, we should kind of start complimenting people and give people, express gratitude towards people based off of, who they are. Now, someone out there is like, yeah, but what if there's someone out there who lost weight and they really want that gratification from other people? If they don't hear that, it might also send like a trigger. So what's your response there?
That's a good question. Honestly, when I have some clients who, let's be honest, would benefit health-wise from weight loss, and a lot of times they do need some external validation or reinforcement. And when it comes to that, I really try to help my clients, first of all, find their why from the very beginning.
Uh-huh.
I'll have people come into my office all the time, like, I want to lose 30 pounds. My first question is, well, what's on the other 30? Like, why 30 pounds? What's on the other side of 30 pounds for you? Certainly, a lot of them may benefit from weight loss from a health perspective. But I really want to dig into like how is this going to change your life? How is this going to improve things for you? Are you going to be able to play with your kids and have more energy? Are you going to have less pain in your joints? Are you going to be able to lower your A1C and prevent type 2 diabetes, or, kind of slow down the effects of type 2 diabetes? If there are some real good whys there, maybe it's I want to live to see my grandkids or my great grandkids, whatever that why is, it's got to be your reinforcement, not just someone else saying, oh, you look like you've lost weight. And certainly it's easier said than done, right? We like that positive reinforcement when we've lost weight. That's part of the reason why a lot of people will fall into this disordered eating, because they were getting that positive reinforcement and they want to keep it coming. So it can be really challenging. And I would also try and remind people, like, if weight loss is your goal and weight loss is appropriate, there are other benefits other than looking good. There are benefits like having better digestion, feeling better, again, not having that pain in your joints. Your family noticing that you're happier and you're healthier and you're able to be more present for them. That is the real reinforcement that is going to keep on giving even after the scale stops going down. Because what I'll often see again is you're getting that positive reinforcement, you're getting that little bit of a dopamine spike by watching the scale go down or having people comment that you've lost weight. But that's not going to last forever, and so it's not sustainable. That's part of the reason we don't see that weight loss is able to be sustained over the long term, and oftentimes is because we're choosing the wrong sources of reinforcement. And so keeping that front of mind. I know it feels good to get those compliments that you've lost weight, but it has to go a little deeper than that for it to stay sustainable for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Good answer to that. And yeah, I think also we have to understand that if we rely on other people to gain a sense of like appreciation, that's typically where the pitfall begins.
Right. You've got to be doing it for you.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, because we even have members now who they struggle at home because they might not have the family support. And if they don't have the family support, it gets really tough, because then it's like, while you might be talking yourself up, you have somebody else talking you down. And although unfortunate, the louder you can make your voice internally, the lower everybody else's voice around you is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the benefit of going to a place like Inner Strength, is you have the community aspect. It is so important. Of course, like, we need to be doing these things for us. We need to have that inner voice be louder than the other outside voices. But having that community of positive reinforcement around you, and really people around you being your cheerleaders and working alongside you, is extremely powerful. And that's why I love sending people over your way. Shameless plug for Inner Strength.
That's good. I didn't even have to do it. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So why do you feel like, we kind of already touched on this a little bit, but how do we improve our relationship with bad food then? What we consider bad food, because bad food, quote unquote, tastes better to some people, and like you said, everyone kind of leaves that gratification into a bad taste, quote unquote, again, bad food. So how do we improve this? How do you feel like we fix this? How do people gain a better relationship so they're not relying on more processed foods, if you will?
Absolutely. This is what I talk to my clients about all the time, and it all comes back to balance. Some of the foods that we consider healthy as a society are foods that are low in calories, higher in volume and micronutrients, like your grilled chicken salad, for example. Foods that we as a culture consider to be unhealthy are tending to be high in calories for the amount of volume it is. So, for example, a pizza. People always talk about, well, you could have a slice of pizza or you could have 3 pounds of broccoli. Like, who's actually going to eat 3 pounds of broccoli? Nobody. But there really is, health really exists kind of in the middle here. So when it comes to balance, what I'm thinking of is, again, that bad food, I don't really like to think of it as bad. I like to think of it as lonely. So it's just an incomplete meal. That slice of pizza, really what it boils down to is some fats, some carbs, and some protein. And our body
Very low protein, by the way. So people like to think that pizza is very high.
Tiny,
yeah.
And your cheese. But all things considered, like, it all boils down to the same macronutrients, just in different ratios as something like a chicken salad. Very different ratios. And so, again, that slice of pizza, we'll just use that as an example. It's really just nutritionally incomplete. And so thinking about, like, building a healthy plate, a good rule of thumb is, creating maybe half of your plate to be some combination of fruits or vegetables, especially at dinner time, mainly vegetables, those non-starchy vegetables, your broccolis, your green beans, your Brussels sprouts, getting a variety of colors in there. About a quarter of your plate to be some kind of source of protein, whether that's, chicken or fish or tofu or, legumes. And then that last quarter would be your carbohydrates. And I think a lot of times when people are trying to follow a healthy diet, it'll just be veggies and protein. And again, that's nutritionally, while it may be helpful for weight loss, it's not sustainable and it's nutritionally incomplete. Your body needs carbs and fats too. Those are your main sources of energy. So that last quarter of your plate being carbs, I like to focus on, instead of no carb, I say slow carb. A complex carbohydrate would be something that it takes your body a little bit longer to digest and it's got a little bit more fiber. So that's going to be your brown rices, your whole grain pastas, chickpeas and beans, whole grain breads. Also got a tiny bit of protein in there too, which doesn't hurt. So kind of building your plate in a more balanced way, instead of just feeling like you have to have a grilled chicken salad for every meal, protein, vegetables, to have a healthy diet and be able to lose weight if that's a goal of yours. Really just kind of finding what the balance is. And the one thing I didn't really mention much is fats, but we need fats the same way we need carbs for energy. We need fats because they help us absorb a lot of our fat-soluble vitamins. They help with hormone production. All of these macronutrients exist in our diet for a reason. The American diet just tends to be very hypercaloric and low in nutrients, so high in calories, low in nutrients. What we consider to be healthy foods tend to be kind of the opposite. And so we really need to find some place in the middle. And so when it comes to building a good relationship with what we call these bad foods, the first thing to do is to realize that it's allowed to exist in your diet. You don't have to completely cut it out, because the more that you tell yourself you can't have it, the more you're going to want it, right? So trying to figure out a way to incorporate it in a way that's balanced. So I'll have my clients have a slice of pizza with a grilled chicken salad. You've got your protein, you've got your non-starchy vegetables, and you've got those carbs and fats that are really going to help balance out that meal. Is it maybe the most helpful choice, like in terms of like the pizza? Maybe not necessarily. Again, we want to be focusing on those complex carbohydrates and healthy unsaturated or polyunsaturated fats, but it's still a nutritionally complete meal. And realizing that you can have these bad foods, in air quotes, in moderation with some of these non-starchy vegetables and lean proteins to kind of help balance things out. So it really all comes down to realizing that you don't have to completely cut them out, but you do have to reassess your relationship with them and maybe what is incomplete at that meal, what is missing, and making sure that it's all balanced.
Very cool. Yeah, and even things like, I like how you mentioned that. And I was listening to a video the other day on YouTube, and the one thing they brought up is really what comes into the equation with like processed foods is they're typically higher fat, and moderate higher carb. And that's like where the trouble is. So for instance, like if you sit down and have tortilla chips, for instance, like tortilla chips aren't necessarily bad for you, but that's the thing. Like you have to understand that they are moderately high in fat and they're moderately high in carbs. So you're kind of getting both those together. Same thing as if, everyone likes to throw cheeseburgers under the bus or like a burger under the bus. Burgers aren't necessarily quote unquote bad for you. If you think about it, now, granted, if you go somewhere and they do like double, 70-30 patties with, a bunch of cheese, throw bacon on there, and then, some other like oil or mayo on there, okay, yes, that's where can be the problem. But if you get a burger, and you could argue the bun too, like depending on the quality of bun, but if you get a burger that has a good quality bun, I mean, there's your protein, there's your carb, and then you get a salad on the side, there's your vegetables, and you're good to go. The problem is most of the time we get fries or onion rings with our burger, which again is another fat and carb combined along with the carb and the fat of the burger. That's kind of where it throws us out of whack.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like when we're going out and having those, especially if we're trying to diet, and then we find ourselves going through the drive-through to get the burger and fries and milkshake and soda, it's coming from a place of scarcity. Mentally, we're thinking to ourselves, okay, diet starts Monday, gotta enjoy this while it lasts because I'm never going to be able to have it again.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, remembering that you can have all of the foods that you like, figuring out a way to make it a little bit more balanced, it takes the power away from that burger and fries. Right?
Sure.
It's no longer this holy grail that you can only have when you're off plan or when you've earned it. It's really just something that you can incorporate in a balanced diet, but figuring out how to make that work.
Exactly. So
again, plug for dietitians.
Yeah, plug for dietitians. All right, so the plane is starting to approach descent, and one question I really wanted to ask you, because a big part of what you do is not just being a dietitian, but also marketing, and you mentioned like being very passionate with social media. So as a young person, what has been your experience growing up with social media and how people your age and older react to it from a health and wellness perspective?
Yeah, well, first of all, social media tends to be our number one information source, not just about health and nutrition, but about lots of different things. And so
everything, pretty much everything.
Literally everything. We get all of our news and, what's going on in the world. It all comes from social media for a lot of people my age and younger. And so something that, again, we have to be a little bit critical about is who's saying this. Who's giving us this information? First of all, are they qualified to be giving this information? Or are they the keto parents who had a diet that worked for them and now they think they're an expert? The second question I would ask a person is, like, what are they selling? Are they just, are they an expert who's trying to give this information that they've studied and want to share? Like, what are their intentions behind saying the things that they're saying about health and nutrition? Are they trying to sell you a supplement, fit tea, like, detox pills? Like, what if they're trying to make a buck off of you? Again, huge red flag there.
Mm-hmm.
And so just when you're engaging with social media, again, just engaging with a critical eye, thinking about who's saying it, what are their qualifications, what are their intentions behind it. And from there, again, it's still not a perfect system, but you can start to delineate who might be a good source of information, who might be a bad source of information. You and I both know we look for those credentials, right? So for someone like me who's nutrition focused, I would look for the RD or RDN at the end of the name. That tells you that they're a registered dietitian. They've studied nutrition for at least 4 or 5 years. I guess you could probably speak to who might be a good resource on social media in terms of fitness. What would you say? What is a credential you might look for?
So this is a tough one, because a lot of times people will look for CPT, which stands for Certified Personal Trainer. However, it's very easy to get. You can literally do a weekend course and be a certified personal trainer. So, one thing I always tell people to look for is, for one, like, did they at least go to school for a certain amount of time? Now, granted, there's some like old gurus like from back in the day who really didn't do much, who they have just so much experience that it's worked for them. And, I'm not taking anything away from them, but from new age, at least have a background in like kinesiology, exercise science, um, biomechanics, something of that sort. And then, that's kind of where at least have a bachelor's degree in that. And then, an extensive degree on top of that's obviously good too, physiology, whatever. And then, for physical therapists, obviously it's a doctorate regardless. So, but those are things. And if they did get a certification, and actually, yes, they did get a certification, something like NASM, so NASM, or NSCA are like the two big ones. And those ones require you to actually have a degree in order to take them. And so those are like two big ones that I typically follow. So
I'm glad you shared that too, because we have that version, the CPT. Our version of that in dietetics is the nutritionist. I could go online and get my dog a nutritionist license online.
that's
And
disturbing.
It's scary. It's scary out there. So you'll see RD or RDN at the end of someone's name. You'll know that they're a registered dietitian. Sometimes they're called a registered dietitian nutritionist, which is just adds a whole layer of confusion.
Right. Yeah.
To that. But just in general, making sure A, that the person is qualified, B, that they have good intentions, and C, does this make sense for me? Maybe this like gluten-free diet makes a lot of sense for someone who has gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, but like, what am I trying to achieve? What are my goals? Does this actually make sense for that goal? That's another good question to ask yourself. And it's always good to just seek out an expert in general to work with you one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Now, how do you, and kind of the flip side of that, and God forbid, like someone out there is going to set themselves on fire after I ask you this, but how can social media actually help us?
Social media is a great tool. There's a reason why I'm making a fool of myself on Instagram Reels every day. It's a really great resource. It's something that we didn't have access to as dietitians 20 years ago. And it's really, and not just dietitians, but trainers, qualified trainers, PTs, doctors even. You'll see a lot of these health professionals now on the social media sphere spreading good information. And so from a marketing standpoint, social media is really beneficial because it's essentially free advertising and free information that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to get before. And so again, social media is a great tool. We just have to, it's again, just the same way we have easy access to hypercaloric and hyperpalatable and nutritious food. We just have to be a little bit more critical and a little bit more, give a little bit more foresight to our choices. We also have to make those same choices with social media. Think about who are you following, who's on your feed, and how is it serving you? Are these people evidence-based? Are they maybe a little bit triggering and just kind of like creating an unrealistic expectation, kind of like a highlight reel? So in terms of how can social media help us as practitioners, it's, again, free advertising and free vehicle for giving information to people that really need it. And from a consumer perspective, social media can really help us, again, learn and get some free, good information. We just have to be careful of who we're getting it from.
Mm-hmm. You said something and it kind of sparked something in my mind too. And one thing I feel like people also have to do is, and I'm talking to myself too, and I say this, is that, whenever we start to, when we get an impulse of, I need to start doing this. For one, so one of my friends, she has this rule whenever she goes shopping, and I love the rule. And the rule is, if she finds something she likes, she sets it down and she gives it the half-hour test. She walks away and keeps shopping, and if a half hour later she's still thinking about that, then she's going to buy it because it means she actually wants it. Now, granted, I don't think it helps her very much. She still buys a lot, but anyhow, she's still, it's still, and it's kind of the same thing, with social media. If you come across something, or if you come across a diet or something you feel like you should like, understand what your emotion is at that point. If you are you're fed up with your day, you had a very stressful day, nothing is going right, it's just the cloud is constantly raining on you, do not get on social media and look for that instant gratification, because you're in a mood that you're going to find things that are you're just going to attach to. Mm-hmm. And it might be a better tactic to instead wait till you're feeling better about yourself, in a better mood, and still see if you need that stuff or if that stuff still appeals to you. Because a carnivore diet might not ever appeal to you until you feel like you can't lose that last 10 pounds.
Absolutely. People are in a vulnerable state then.
Yeah. Something else that we have to understand too with social media. Again, I agree with you. I think that's the only reason I use social media, is because it helps to get information out to people. But you also have to realize that as soon as you look up someone or you find someone or look at someone for a certain amount of time on social media, the algorithm now is going to send that and punch you in the face with that every single time you get on it.
Absolutely.
And so people like to have this like all by, fate type of thing where, I was thinking about I should maybe try a keto diet. And then so I looked it up, and then Faith just kept putting it in front of Fate kept putting it in front of my face. So I obviously should do it. No, that's just an algorithm that's putting it there artificially. And so we have to be aware of that as well. So just my little 2 cents I wanted to throw in there.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's huge, right? You're getting that constant feedback loop of whatever you're interested in. It's going to show you more of those things. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's popular or that it's good or that there's any validity to it. It's just going to keep showing you the things that you're interested in, which can be so problematic for lots of different reasons.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, Devon, I always end the show with 3 big takeaways and action items that people can take from this episode and move forward with it. So, you're already prepared with this from what I understand, so I'm very excited to hear. So what are your 3 takeaways for the audience?
So my first takeaway is to, again, find those things that give you that joy and comfort outside of food, but recognize that it's okay to have food as a choice of joy and comfort. Again, if stress eating and emotional eating is something that you struggle with, I wouldn't take away that stimulus without replacing it with anything else. So I would just think about those eating habits that you don't think are serving you, figure out what they provide to you, and then figure out other things in your life that you can sometimes replace it with. So that's number 1, find other sources of joy and comfort. Step number 2 is to make sure that you have created a balanced plate for yourself. So you're not just having the pizza all the time, you're not just having the grilled chicken salad, but you're really finding somewhere in between meals that are consistently good sources of non-starchy vegetables, lean proteins, and complex carbohydrates and healthy fats at each meal. This is going to be really important for, again, keeping those cravings at bay, so you're not likely to lean on those foods that are hypercaloric and hyperpalatable. So that's number 2. The third tip is to make sure that you are looking at social media and just media sources in general with a critical eye, especially when it comes to health and nutrition. Make sure the people that you're learning from are qualified. Make sure that they're not trying to make a buck off of you. And make sure that whatever they're saying actually makes sense for you specifically. So those are my 3 big takeaways.
Love it. Love it. Easy, actionable, no BS, just like this show. So, Devon, where can people find you, get a hold of you? I think you're a dietitian. That's what I gained from this podcast. So how can people get a hold of you and find you?
I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah, if you want to follow, honestly, one of the best ways to engage with me is social media. So you can find me on Instagram. It's Devon the Dietitian, and that's Devon. So you can, and it's also dietitian with a T. So we can put that in the show notes if you want, but it's at Devon the Dietitian on Instagram. You can always shoot me a DM, take a look at my silly little reels and TikToks. Maybe you'll learn a thing or 2, who knows. The other way you can reach me if you're interested in working with a registered dietitian, we accept insurance, which is pretty rare in the private practice space for dietitians. So you can find me by reaching scheduling at casespecificnutrition.com. That'll connect you with my care coordinator, who can get you scheduled to meet with me, and she'll check your insurance and do all that jazz for you. You can meet with me in person, virtual. I personally work out of the Robinson office in Pittsburgh. We've got offices all over Pittsburgh: East Liberty, Plum, North Hills, South Hills, Robinson, Altoona, virtual. We're all over the place. We accept insurance. Again, I work out of the Robinson location, but if you want to get scheduled with me, it's scheduling at casespecificnutrition.com. If you want to connect with me on social media, it's Devon the Dietitian on Instagram.
Love it. Devon, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I feel like there's so much that people can take away from this. And again, thank you so much too for sharing your experiences. It really, it kind of helps to drive home the point to everybody. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This has been really fun, and I love that we can connect
awesome.
on this realm and kind of shout from the rooftops.
Yes. Awesome. All right, everybody. This is Dr. Tyler at the Health, Fit, and Pain-Free Pittsburgh podcast. Y'all have a great day. Love you all. Mwah, mwah.
Recording stopped.